Hello, this is State Machine Overview featuring Godot 3 because it looked like it was going to be a lot of a lot of finicking to get this up to Godot 4. So yeah, there's some noise outside. I just woke up, the window's open, rain, it's beautiful. Anyway, um, yeah, so State Machine. Like this little project is just an example of that, right? It's just a thing I made a while ago. You see the state up here? He's walking. Then you jump, then you fall, then you press shift, you're running. What else is there? There's crawl, crouch when you're, it's like idle but not moving. Crawl, you're at half speed. You can go up this ladder, you're climbing, you're holding, falling, walking. Getting off of ladders is tricky. I don't know, I didn't really put a lot of time into that. You can double jump, wow. And yeah, so that's all well and dandy. But when you look at the player script, holy smokes, there's nothing in here. How does it work? Because, well, a couple of things, right? So the player itself, he has a collisionist sprite, ladder detector, and then the state machine. State machine is just kind of a way of I guess I should start from where you're starting from in your project, where you have the enums, right? When you have the enum, like let's say you have an enum in here that's like, idle. Whatever, like those kinds of things, right? You end up with, in this script, or like whatever's controlling your character, you have to check idle in a bunch of different places. Like, okay, is my velocity 0? I'm in idle, okay. But like if you're setting that in movement, then you lose the ability to kind of choke point that control if you have other things going on. Like if you're moving but you can attack while moving, how do I say this? Like, okay, let me try to draw up an example. So like if there's a function, let's say move, right, whatever, and you have you do movement or move and slide and all that jazz, whatever, based on the inputs, and then you say like, okay, well, if is moving state equal idle, right? Or yeah, well, let's switch that then. So you'd have to do that there, but then any other time that you want to do something, you also have to run that check and also run that. And so when you have 3 states, it's not such a big deal, but it kind of it scales very well, which is to say the problem scales very well, that for every state you enter now you have to run that many checks in that many places, multiplied by how many other states you have, right? And it becomes very unwieldy. Yeah, so to avoid that, or to kind of get away from that sort of general kind of pattern, that's when you have a state machine. So the state machine is just attached to a thing. So the state machine here, by it being attached to the player, is going to handle the states of the player. And the states, in this case, have a lot of states, but don't worry about all of these. They're not even all implemented. They were what I wanted to do when I kind of tinkered with this project. But basically, think of every one of these nodes as one of the entries in here. Can I now go back? Yeah. Like, idle, walk, run. Like, they're equivalent in the sense that they're the thing you're checking for. But the difference is the thing handles its own checks, right? That's kind of the big shift. Instead of having a state that's just a variable and you're checking for it throughout the code, the thing itself handles all its own checks. So if you go in idle, I'll take it from one step before this, which is when you go into, so the state machine is handling what state is active, right? I'll put a check mark on that or an ear mark on that. So the state machine is handling for the player, or whatever it's attached to, what state is active for this thing? I'm actually worried about the sound because like there's a lot of trucks going on. Whatever, like hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. The state machine is handling for whatever it's attached to what state that thing is in, right? The state, ignore the stuff at the bottom because that's something I did for this project, but it's not, I don't think I'd recommend it in the future. But like this part essentially, like up to here, right? This is the essential part. Ignore this handling state contents. Up to here. What the state does, it's a type of like data structure, right? Where you're saying, here's a callback. There's a callback called input. Obviously, you know that in Godot, that's underscore input event or underscore process or underscore physics process. What you're doing here in the state is you're creating a handle for those, but the state isn't going to run its own callbacks. The state machine is going to look at whatever state is running, and if there's an unhandled input event in the project, like the player is sitting there pressing a button, the state will run like its input event stuff. You state name. Actually, I'm not sure why it's structured like this. This has been a long time since I've touched this. But the idea, this is all about changing states, but I'm actually confused by that because there should be this thing being called like physics process, right? In state machine, right? State machine, yeah. Yeah, okay, wow. Okay, so exactly the first line, and I just missed it because it was at the end. But so that state machine is handling for the state, whatever state is active, like the state machine is handling that state's callbacks through these, like this interface essentially. Like this input without the underscore stands for whatever you want to happen on input for the state, but you're letting the state machine handle the input. It's like whatever state is active right now, do its input. Well, it should be whatever state is active. I'm actually not sure why I did it this way because I followed a tutorial and it makes sense, and now it doesn't. But because I just did it for a game jam game and I did it completely differently and it still worked. So I like, but the base idea is you're creating a state machine. It's going to handle what state is active. The states are going to communicate to it when they should switch out from one another, and then like each state's callbacks are going to decide what happens while you're in that state for the owner, for the player. Like the idle state decides what happens to the player when it's in idle state, and then the state machine is kind of intermediary to switch between them, right? But then if we look at the idle state, the missing piece of that is how do they handle switching out, and that's kind of where you have these input with these callbacks sort of delegates. I'm using computer words wrong right now, programming words wrong. This is not what a delegate is, I don't think, but it's like the state machine is handling the input callback for this state by in its own unhandled input checking what state is active and then calling input on it through this non-underscore input on the state, right? It's a lot of, it feels really jumbled to say it out loud, but hopefully like you can look at it, and I can upload this too, and you can see it. It's in Godot 3 though, but yeah. So then in the callbacks of every state, right? So like this is idle. So this is when you are idle, when the active state is idle. For the player in its state machine right now, the active state is idle. What happens? If you are idle and you're laddered, you go up. This is maybe a bit of a, I'm gonna just for clarity's sake, because the ladder stuff is confusing. Partly because I haven't touched this in like literally years. But so if you press left or you press right, you could be walking. You could, but if you're pressing left and you're pressing right and you're also pressing run, well then run. and returning run here makes it so that the state machine changes to that state. So this is how the input state, while you are in input, the player is in the input state. The state machine is listening for the inputs for the physics process, and the input state itself is deciding when movement happens while I'm active, what should be the thing we transition to. Should it be run? Should it be walk? Depending on this input. Or if, if we're moving, or if we're just standing there and the floor disappears, let's say, the idle state itself decides, telling the state machine, okay, now we're in false state. And if we can look at false state, it's basically just, if we're moving, okay, fuck the ladder again. If we're if we're trying to move, or if we press jump while we're falling, okay, well then we're in jump state. The state fall decides what it is able to transition to, and that's how you create those kind of choke points for the control, so you don't have to make these checks everywhere. The false state is able to tell it, what am I able to transition to, and what are the conditions of that. This is what you transition to, these are the conditions for that. And they depend on sometimes input, sometimes physics process. That's why they're kind of scattered through different functions. Because that's how they're detected, basically. But that's the basic idea, right? And I don't know why game camera's open. Is there other ones I kind of look at? And then you might wonder, well, this is a lot of nodes, right? It's a lot to keep track of. You have to have a lot of scripts taking up real estate in this list if you want to have them all open, because like right now I don't have a lot of them open. I don't have walk. Let's see. There's a lot of these. But you can see how each script is limited to just the essential of what it does. It's just switching in and out. So you're handling your control in a concise way. It's a lot of stuff to have open, and you can close it and come back to it. Might be a little bit annoying to find it and open it again, but but the idea is you have okay, so crouch is only deciding one thing, which is what happens while we're in crouch, but also how to switch to other states. So you're confining the logic of how to switch and what to switch to inside of states, so that you don't have to keep revisiting each state every time you add another state. Now, there's a caveat to that, which is if I remember I was gonna do roll, return roll. If you're crouched and you press right with jump, I was gonna do this fancy thing, you go into a roll mode. So, at some point this doesn't exist, and then no, you add it. So yes, you do have to go back and revise, but what you're adding to this is not all the logic that goes into it. It's just deciding when you roll. All I did when I added this for the crouch script, let me be more verbose here. When I wanted to add the roll, all I had to do for the crouch script is add its way of deciding how to switch to roll. When is the time that we're going to enter the roll state? The roll state then handles all the stuff that is the movement while we're rolling and all that, whatever, and when it stops. So yeah, so you do have to revise, and it is a lot of scripts, but everything is more self-contained. If you prefer that, I think it's great if you have more complicated states, because it prevents you having to go back and revisit all the stuff all the time. And obviously this is a state machine for a character, a 2D character. Oh yeah, remove the ladder. So there's other applications that are not necessarily what you might think of at a state machine, like for your dungeon crawler stuff, what state the dungeon is in is its own thing, and it might be more difficult to determine for that case what the conditions are for changing states, because it might just be a checking a variable, but I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I really don't know. But here, my point is this. Here, the changing of states is dependent on a lot of feedback that the Godot built-in nodes provide already. The kinematic or character bodies already are detecting when you're on floor, when you're falling, and all this stuff. So it's just a matter of hooking into those and checking, am I falling or am I moving? as opposed to, you know, checking other external variables for that. So that's a whole other layer to the complexity of your case, that you have to figure out how to like communicate its time to change to a different state, and then how to limit that state. So yeah, I don't know, and I'm trying to see if there's things I'm forgetting to mention. I don't know. I don't think so. Nothing's coming to mind right now. So I'm gonna just jump off a cliff now. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Oh no. Oh.